mean, COVID in some ways was a reset. I think you had even said in one way you did see a separation of the sheep and the goats, but now you have an opportunity where if you had a context that was dominated by the old wineskins, you do have a chance for something different. And so I definitely want to move into now, how do we do church in a way that Paul would come in and go, that's it. This is how you're supposed to do church, based on what we read in the New Testament, and what are those marks of how do I assess if I'm a leader, if I'm an elder, because I want to get into two sides of it. How do I, as a leader, assess if I'm doing it right? But as a congregant, what should I be expecting in a healthy church? Because I think that's a whole kind of disheveled mess there. But from the top down, how would you say we should do church life today? How do we establish or how do we build on what we have as a church?
I think the thing that probably helped me the most as I went through the Antioch School courses was in the Pauline course, was establishing in my mind that the church is a family of families. Mm-hmm. That the if you want to say prototype or blueprint for the church is really the family, and that was so helpful. And the thing is, it gets kind of mixed up because you have body language, you have building language, and you have family language. Yeah. But what's interesting, what I find is when Paul is addressing people, he almost exclusively uses family language. Mm-hmm. Brothers and sisters. And sisters. I was with you like a father with a child. Mother child. This family kind of language is there. And I think that's on purpose because, for one thing, I think it draws us back to the ultimate and eternal family, the Godhead, and which in and of itself is complete. And so then you have the family established in Genesis that's reflective of that, if you will. And so it makes sense to me that the church would be reflective of that as well. I think it is. And I think it comes, and again, I think it comes out of the scripture. I'm not trying to push that into the scripture. I just think if you read Acts and the Pauline epistles, and you read them without a lot of preconceived ideas about what the church is, that keeps coming to the forefront is this idea of a family kind of setting. You've got a meal together, you've got fellowship together, you've got leaders who have certain responsibilities, you have expansion or multiplication, it's all these kind of family things that I think you have more family than you do, for example, body. I know there's body language in there, but more of it lines up with the family. So for me, that's really key. If we can get at and constantly when I'm thinking about ministry in the church, that a family motif, if you will, is always there. It's always there because that's the context, the paradigm, I think, that is most helpful in thinking about how does the church supposed to operate together? How is the church supposed to live together? How is the church, whatever you want to call it, how is it supposed to function? And one of the other things I think that gets in our way sometimes is kingdom language.
Yeah.
Which none of us really understand because none of us grew up in a kingdom anyway.
Right.
So we're already at a loss. Right. But everybody at some level has grown up in a family. Not a perfect family, but everybody understands at some level family. And families are the thing that have perpetuated across all of time. Mm-hmm. Nations and kingdoms have not. They come and go and they rise and fall. But family has, and when God comes to Abraham, what does he say? I'm gonna make a family. Now, he says nation. I understand that, but that nation was family oriented. The Old Testament's, throughout the history of Israel, they talk of themselves in terms of their relationship to one another as siblings, as the 12 tribes who are the 12 sons and so forth. So that would be like baseline, I think, to help think about the church is family, and then you can begin to start putting some pieces together that help understand. Okay, this is why, for example, part of the reason I'm so strong on celebrating the Lord's Supper every week. That's a family event. It's a family meal.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, for eternity. This family kind of setting. So that's just one. But the other thing about it is when you get that connection, then you begin to understand this sort of spiral up, hopefully, where strong families develop strong churches reinforce strong families that reinforce strong churches, and you've got this growing up kind of thing that way.
I love that idea, because generally we think of things very linear, and there's almost two contradictions we have in the life of the church. On the one hand, people look for a pastor who preaches well, who has a dynamic ministry. You always see that word dynamic used, but people don't typically think in terms of elders and their ability to lead their families. That's like a bygone thought. It doesn't matter how well does he do at the church, but his household is kind of the culture and DNA that man brings to his leadership in the church. He could be very pragmatic and abusive at the same time, right? And yet we have this consumerism culture that really is coming to a church saying, what can this pastor do to perform for me, to thrill me with his preaching? But if you're really looking for, how am I going to be equipped and sent into mission? I really care now how that pastor or those elders are with their families. And we've kind of dismissed those qualifications almost. We're looking, in some sense, not completely, for a president or a CEO, someone who's capable of managing the budget, who can, of course, he can preach, but, keep the church doors open, basically, and maybe bring some more people in. But in reality, and I've heard from a couple people, and I think even you, when we talk about the idea of, A group, B group, C group, that pastor is going to put his efforts into one specific group. And I think oftentimes that needs to be developing men into leaders, because men should be leading families. Men should be leading their homes. And if we have that, I think we could get away from the celebrity pastor who has to do all things. I think in some sense we could be abusive to our pastors, because we want them to be the surrogate everything. The surrogate father, the youth ministry leader, and kind of like the surrogate husband to the women who don't have husbands, right? And so if he's not raising up men who could be husbands, I think you can create an atmosphere that's very unhealthy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Pastor-centered is the term I would use for how I think the traditional churches, particularly independent Baptistic churches that I've grown up in, they're pastor-centered. They have elders or deacons or some form of broader leadership, but everything really centers around the pastor. And just like everything really centers around Sunday morning and around the preaching Sunday morning. Yeah. And so, and of course, if it's going to center around Sunday morning and it's going to center around the preaching Sunday morning, then it's going to center around the pastor, because he's got to be, he's the preaching guy. Right. And so, I think it is difficult. For one thing, I have a great book. It's called How to Murder a Minister.
Oh, wow. Got to link that one in the description.
Well, and what it basically says is churches, and you're right, congregations abuse their pastor because they ask the impossible. I'll say it this way. Here's an example. You hire a guy, pastor, right? He's gonna work. Let's just say he's gonna work 40 hours a week. That's what you're gonna pay him for. And you want him to spend 30 hours a week in his study learning the word so he can bring great preaching. Right. But you also want him, let's say 20 hours. But you also want him to spend 20 hours a week managing the various programs of the church. Yeah. But you also want him to spend 20 hours a week visiting everybody in the church, because everybody needs a personal visit from him. But I don't know, that's 60 hours now. So not only time-wise, but then gifting-wise, we want a guy who's personality and giftings lead him to stay in his study and study hard. But we want this, at the same time, we want that guy to be so personable that he gets out and visits everybody and welcomes everybody and he's all friendly and all that. And they just don't, that doesn't exist generally.
Right.
And so one of the things that I've been working at here is beginning to rethink the idea of the full-time vocational pastor into, I don't like to use the word bivocational, but I haven't come up with a better one yet.
Me neither.
But a team of leaders who are compensated for work they do in the church, but not necessarily full-time, in order to achieve more gifting. I mean, if you take 3 guys with 3 different gifts that the church needs, and each of them works 20 hours a week, you've got more than if you take one guy with a gift and he works 60 hours a week or 40 hours a week or whatever. You just get more. Because, it was interesting. When I came here, Ken and I had very, very different gift sets. And it was recognized by a lot of people. They're like, wow, this is great because both of you bring gift sets that the church needs. And we were very clear about that for ourselves. I didn't try to do Ken's job. Ken didn't try to do my job. And we were able to function well that way. And so now in my setting, and our setting up here, it's very difficult for a church to hire an associate or a co-pastor.
Right.
Most of these churches, you're talking about 50 to 60 people, and they might not even be able to afford a full-time pastor. But one of the things I've been trying to get away from is the idea that a guy's working another job because the church can't afford to pay him. Mm-hmm. So Chris and I were talking, and when Chris started out pastoring the church, about 30 people, they could pay him a salary to do about 35 hours of work a week. And I said to him early on, if the church grows and gets to a point where they can pay you a full salary, don't expect that that's what should happen. You might be better off taking those new funds and putting them towards compensating a guy who will come in and do some of the things that you can't do.
Right.
And so I've really kind of been thinking out that line of thinking, which is maybe a little different than family oriented, because you don't have like 2 fathers trying to lead a family. So some of those things don't match up 100%. But my point simply is I think we've got to move away from the pastor-centeredness.
Right.
And here's a big key. Here's a big key for me in this. And this is where I got so much help from Antioch School. Antioch School's way of educating revolves around the discussion group.
Yeah.
And what I like about the discussion group is this acknowledgement. Every Christian is indwelt by the Holy Spirit who is teaching them. And so, Paul, this is what Paul says to the Corinthians, like, hey, when you gather together, everybody should be bringing something to the gathering. Mm-hmm. And he's not just talking about food. You should be bringing a word. You should be bringing a testimony. You should be bringing a song. You should have something, because the Spirit's at work in you. And that's not what we have. What we end up with is, the preacher's got it all, and he's going to download the information to me, and then I'm going to decide if I like the information or not, and then I'll go off and maybe use it or maybe not. That's very different than it's expected, and I do this at One Life a lot because it's a smaller group. There's about 30 to 40 people. I ask them questions in the middle of the sermon.
Okay.
And then I'll shut up and wait. I don't give them the answer. And it's uncomfortable. They're getting used to it now. I'm over there once a month, and they're getting used to, like, hey, Mike shows up, I better put on my thinking cap. But, and I'm not always just asking them a knowledge question. So this is the other thing about a discussion group is, do we as pastors really believe that in our congregation, people are indwelt by the Holy Spirit, and they can speak truth into our lives and into the life of the church in a way that we perhaps cannot? And I don't think many pastors really believe that. They would say they do, probably, but I'm not sure they really do. Because when you look at how they act, their actions don't reflect that. Their actions reflect, I've got all the information, especially because I got it at school, and now I'm going to bring it all to you.
See, this could be for those who are listening who are leaders. This is probably controversial in a sense. You'll never be a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, so just face that. But
That's okay.
so let me ask 2 rapid fire questions. A church leader comes in, elder, pastor, minister. What would you say, maybe in 2 minutes or less? How can I assess my ministry to really see am I on track? What will be the main themes that you would kind of say, or maybe some metrics you might think of, whether it's themes or metrics, I'm just throwing different words out, that you would say, hey, here's what you need to think about in your ministry if you're doing it right?
Well, first of all, the key, I think there's a couple key things that Paul seems to be after. One question would be to ask myself, is unity growing in our church? Are we becoming more and more like-minded? That'd be one. And I don't mean by that simply as everybody agreeing with what the pastor says.
Right. That's different.
In terms of the scripture, are we becoming more like-minded? Right. And then Paul consistently uses the word maturing. So is this congregation, could I actually look at them and say, yeah, they've grown in areas. They're further along in loving one another. They're further along in, whatever it is. In Antioch School, they've actually put together some assessment worksheets that assess a leader, but they also assess the congregation in what they believe. And it all comes right out of Paul's letters. It's straight out of Paul's letters. And it's looking at it and saying, if you see this in what Paul expected of them, do I expect that of me? Does that actually happen? So I think that's a key part of it. And again, it goes back to, though, the leader has to have put in place some kind of criteria to assess. What is my assessment? If your assessment is simply more people in the pew on Sunday morning, then you can measure that. But is that really going to be a healthy measurement? Is that going to get you, is that going to get you where you need to be in terms of maturing and advancing the kingdom of God in your area?
That's good. And so let me flip that question around on, I know 2 types of people. People who are looking for churches. A lot of that happened during COVID. Either some churches closed, or there are people who moved, or some said, my church still isn't meeting in person. I want to go somewhere where I can fellowship in person. And then we also have college students. They're going away. And I know you've had kids, you've had daughters get married. Someone who's moving, leaving, going somewhere. What words or exhortation do you give them in terms of finding a healthy church? How do you advise them to go about that search and being a part of the ministry they're going to go to?
Well, I think one key thing is what I talked about earlier. As far as you can tell, is the Bible in the driver's seat. Now, that's going to come out really strong in the preaching. And in that case, one of the things I would say is you really, I'm gonna plug Simeon Trust. You really need to understand, is this preacher actually preaching the text that he said he's preaching today? That's the Bible in the driver's seat, but not just in preaching. Is the Bible in the driver's seat in other areas like singing, praying, fellowshipping, supper, etc.? Is it pretty obvious that these leaders have looked to the scriptures and let the scriptures tell them how this should happen, not just their tradition or some other model? That's one thing. I think the other is, what level of participation does the church encourage? And that's all around, but I not necessarily like, hey, we got an open spot here, we want to put you in there. I mean, like, I'm talking about even the Sunday morning gathering. What kind of participation or level is encouraged, not allowed? And there's a difference. Like, hey, I want us to do special music. Oh, okay, we'll let you do that. That's different than pursuing very specifically people to use their gift in music to edify the congregation. Those are two different ways of thinking about that. So that'd be one thing I would look at is what level of participation. Am I going to come and just sit, sing some songs, and then listen to prayers and listen to the preaching and even the song time? Is it more of a show than it is, something where I'm really, really drawn in to participate in it? And for example, are they going to talk at all about the song and what that song means?
Right.
And then I think one big criteria is simply, is there any opportunity for me to share in testimony of what God is doing in my life? This is one of the things I've seen lacking the most in our congregations is opportunity for me sitting out with the others to say, here's what God's been doing in my life. Here's how these sermons have impacted me. Is that there? So that's what, again, it'd be weird to be in a family where, the old time, like children are just supposed to be seen and not heard, right? That's weird. We kind of recoil at that. And I think with good reason. But when we get into the church setting, that's exactly what we say. You're going to be seen but not heard, because the one that's supposed to be heard is the guy that's up front. I tell you, one big change that's happened here that's been really good is Ken has released a lot of the planning and preparation for the Sunday morning gathering to a team of people who do that. They choose the songs. They write transitions for the songs and the readings and these kinds of things. They've decorated in the platform in different ways and stuff. So he doesn't, number one, he doesn't have to do that. It's no longer on his plate. But number two, other people are getting to participate. And, he can draw back from that. And so, again, it allows for this expanded participation. I'm gonna guess in any given month right now, we probably have 30 people or more participating at some point in one of the gatherings.
Wow.
And we got about 95 people coming on a Sunday, maybe 90. So, a third of the people on Sunday morning are participating. And of course, there's people who aren't ever going to do that from the standpoint of that it's not where they feel comfortable or gifted. But that's okay. They have other ministry. But versus a lot of times where the congregation does virtually nothing. You have the pastor does pretty much everything, and you probably have a pianist that plays the piano, and then that's about it.
You said something that got to me. I have a daughter who's, Lord willing, going to be heading off to college by next year. And so we constantly talk about ministry, and not just where she'll go, but what she'll do and how she'll be equipped in that. And I think if we would find a ministry that is shaped by the Bible, we also have to be people who have our life and our expectations shaped by the scriptures also. And by that I mean, for me, a big shift happened for me maybe 10 years ago as I'm learning about church planting and all this. And I would hear these stories of how people, how God birthed something in them to go plant. I listened to John Bryson, at Dallas Seminary. They have a week, like a church planting week. And he comes and shares his testimony on how he was somebody gave him a copy of Tim Keller's study on Galatians, and he studied it. And out of that, he's saying, there's this vision to plant a church in Tennessee that was different from what, people were used to and what they had seen. He contacts Brian Loritz. They hung out for a whole weekend and did nothing but talk through those scriptures and play PlayStation, if I remember correctly. And what happened was the church that they were building was different. He said, it wasn't built on one person or one person's preaching style. You might have somebody who's new to preaching and he's being developed and who's going to preach, and his sermon's not going to be like the other people. And this is only his second or third sermon. And so if you're there, the expectation is not, I'm going to get this amazing, sermon version of heroin, but instead I'm going to get solid exposition for a guy who's learning how to preach. Right. And so for me, it started shaping how I saw the preaching and Sunday morning worship, that they're training up people who are going to sing and people who write songs and who are really going to talk about the songs that they're singing. Like you said, as they're singing them, your expectations should really be shaped, by that. And so a lot of times when we're consumers driven and searching for a church, we show our immaturity and even our sin because we have an expectation that you'll never fail me. Your sermon will always be on point. Your sanctuary will always be cold in the summer and warm in the winter. You'll always have a budget. You'll always have a benevolence fund, and not, I want to grow with you. I want to be a part of what God is doing here. I want my life to intersect with yours, and I want to be sent into wherever God is calling me. And that's something that I'm very concerned about with this generation, because you can have everything, right? You raised on Instagram, you know all the clips, you've heard all the popular preachers, and so I want to wind down, but I definitely want to dig into your family life. And, I've got so much insight from you on, how you're raising your kids, how you and your wife go about discipling others. We don't have time for a week-long dig into the Neigh family life, but it is fascinating. And, what are some of the principles and kind of practice of how you work on, discipling your household, how you and your wife go about bringing in others and showing hospitality to them? I think that's a lost art. Can you speak to that? I'm hoping I'm asking the question correctly.
Yeah. Well, one of the keys is that I'm raising my children to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and others as themselves. That's bottom line.
Right.
In one sense, I'll say to people, I don't care if my kids can add 2 + 2 or if they can spell Jack. Mm-hmm. If they love God and they love their neighbor. And frankly, for centuries, people couldn't spell. They couldn't read,
right.
But they could love God.
Yeah.
They didn't need to. They could love God and they could love others. So that's first. And one of the ways that we make sure that's first is my kids in their curriculum for school, Bible is central. They are going to do Bible. They're going to be in the Bible. I think I mentioned in my some notes to you that by the time my kids get through high school, they have covered the Old Testament and the New Testament 4 times. Mm-hmm. And
wow.
So not only have I prepared them well for Bible trivia, they just beat the pants off people in that. My son-in-law, and I can say this because he said it, my son-in-law doesn't like to play Bible trivia with my daughter, even though he went to Lancaster Bible College and got a Bible degree.
Wow.
Because she just knows more. Now, granted, some of them are just facts, but still, right. the point is their foundation is that, and they know, I tell them, what's most important to me is that you love God and love your neighbor. I don't care what you do for work. I don't care what level of education you have. All of that stuff, while it's good and important, if you don't love God and love your neighbor, all that other stuff's not going to matter. Right? Because in the end, that's just stuff down here on earth. If you're going to store up treasure in heaven, you've got to store up this greater capacity to glorify God by loving Him and loving your neighbor. So that's real key, and that then is the other part of it is too we work really hard to develop our older children to learn to actually parent with the younger children. I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about homeschooling, and mm-hmm. people who the socializations. And by the way, I had an issue with socialization early on when I thought about homeschooling. But here's the question I always ask them. I ask somebody like you: when in your life right now do you spend 40 hours a week with people the exact same age as you?
When in my life do I spend 40 hours with people my age?
Right now.
Work. That's it.
Well, work. Yeah, but how old are you?
41.
Okay, so everybody you work with is 41?
Oh, not at all. No,
not at all.
Older and younger.
Right. See, again, this goes back to the Antioch school. Chris is interacting with a broad range of ages and thus experience as well as wisdom, maturity, etc. Once you get out of the school system, you just almost never are you in a situation where you spend most of your waking hours with a group of people that are exact same age as you are. So with my children, one of the things I've done is our older kids they begin to learn how to parent by actually taking care of our younger kids. And our younger kids are instructed, when this older child is responsible for you, you better treat them the same way you would me, because they have my authority. And that's what, and then I tell the older kid, you better treat them right. You don't lord it over them. You're there to serve them. And so I'm trying to instill in them these principles of life, and especially of parenting, so that that's, you know, they don't go off and get married and get pregnant and go, what do I do now?
Right.
They've been parenting.
Right.
They've been parenting their younger siblings. Now, in our situation, it's a little easier because, you know, I've got more kids, but that may just be an argument for why it's helpful to have more kids.
Yeah.
You know, but so that I would say that's part of our, that's part of our culture, I think, in our home. And hospitality wise, you know, we just, we like people. That was, you know, that was something, and that wasn't always true of me. There was a time when I could take or leave people. It didn't much matter to me. Mm-hmm. But a time came in my life where I realized, you know what, I need to actually like people, all kinds of people, anybody. And not just, and you know, what's very instructive is what Jesus says: don't invite to your house the guy who's got all the money and can invite you back to his house. Yeah. You know what? Invite over the person who has nothing, and it's impossible for them to return your hospitality. And when you do that, you'll be storing up treasure in heaven, because God's going to reward you. If you just invite the rich guy over and he invites you over, it's quid. You're even. Right. And you get nothing out of that in eternity. Yeah. So we don't look at social strata or income level or ability of somebody to advance my agenda when we're doing hospitality. We just open our home up and invite people to come over and spend time with us, and we get to spend time with them.
You're really fleshing out Titus 2. I mean, you're talking about a framework where you can train up older men, train up younger men, older women, train up younger women, and making a practice out of showing hospitality.
Right. And see, that's how that translates, I think, into the church. So you got your gospel ministers who are training and discipling and helping that the elders and deacons and at large the people. And then you've got your elders who are overseeing that local congregation, which I think it can roughly be the way a wife and mother is caring for a particular home. And then you've got this has really been fascinating for me as I've thought about this, your deacons. Yeah. These are like your older children who you are able to use to help with your younger children. You know, that's what the deacon is. They're a helper. Yeah. I think we've gotten a little off base on what a deacon really is. They're there to help the elders do the work. And my older children are there to help my wife and I do what we need to do to be a family. And so I'm trying to do that in my family, which hopefully will then strengthen the local church. If you had every family in your church doing that in their family, you're just going to have a stronger church. Right. And then the church is going to keep reinforcing that. We've talked about this before, right? Sometimes the church is an obstacle to that. Yep. The demands of the church become so heavy that family can't really function as a family. Now, you can't always blame the church. Families have to decide. And I'll just give you a real practical one. We're thought of as kind of odd by a number of people because since 1993, when we got married, we've never had a television. Oh, wow. And we spend no time watching TV. Now, we occasionally will watch a movie, but that'll be like maybe once a week, if that. We were very intentional about that's. I mean, you can make it into family time, so I'm not trying to harass people who have it, but we just didn't feel like for us that was going to work. Too great a temptation to just kind of sit there and take it in rather than let's do something where we're active together and engaging, together. And not only that, but we're engaging in real life. I'd rather have people over to my house and spend a couple hours with them than watch a family on TV do something.
Yeah.
I'd rather walk through a crisis with somebody at my house than watch it on TV. And so I think that that's just a way that we've intentionally said we're going to focus on our family growing together and sort of pull the rug out from the entertainment idea.
Right. It can be such a distraction. I think there are a lot of dangers, and maybe not even so much with TV, but with appliances, with phones, with devices, with the internet, with social media. I think there needs to be a line. I read a book some years ago, and I forgot who wrote it, but the advice was when you get married, never have a TV in your bedroom, and for the first year of your marriage at least, do not have a TV at all. Develop a habit of talking, laughing, dreaming together, crying, fighting, but not the TV, because it is truly amusement. It is the absence of thinking. It'll give you an escape where you really need to be mindful and present. And that was some of the best advice I ever got. I have a TV, but I often, I'm very much into, crypto, blockchain, and what I see emerging with the metaverse, I think is dangerous, because we have a time in America where it's hard to be connected to people. Everyone's in a tribe, and now you have a platform that gives everyone an escape. You can go into this world, create an avatar, and be who you've always wanted to be. You don't have to face the struggles of your real life. You don't have to face the sanctification process, if you will. You can escape and go be, Erik the King, whatever, and now you can live there for a fee. And in a sense, you're having your dopamine fulfilled every day. And now you can escape your marriage. You can escape parenting. You don't have to be a man to be in the metaverse. And so I think there are things like that we need to practically consider, and we can discuss on some occasions, and we got to be really, really careful.
Well, wasn't that the temptation at the beginning in the garden?
Yeah.
Eve, you can be more than what God created you to be.
Yep.
And that is exactly it. We're not content. Go back to life end. We're not content to actually have our life be unique the way it's already designed. Mm-hmm. We have to try and invent something else because that's what we would like to be. That's what we wish we could be. And that very seldom lines up with reality, and then we get frustrated.
That's my fear for a lot of men, is that I know many men who come up in an environment where they have to be someone different when they're home. Especially for some of us who came from single mother households. We know how to just survive and not thrive. We know how to shut down and kind of be callous and get ready to be, criticized and everything. And then we go back out and try to become somebody in the workforce. But what do you do when people are losing jobs like crazy? And now your identity is gone along with the job. You don't know how to function. And so there's, substance abuse, mental health issues. There's a lot that we need to be aware of as church leaders going into the future. And how we disciple men, I think, is going to be a big, big issue that I pray about and think about. And that being said, that's why there's a need for Antiochs and for CentrePoint. Given all that's going on now and over the next, let's say, 5-10 years, what's your vision for CentrePoint's impact? Are you looking for God to kind of expand your reach there?
We're I would say CentrePoint is still in a process of trying to get groundwork with people, deconstructing, if you will, and get into then renewal, if you will, renewal. We're going to look at this stuff again. So it's a little slow, but my vision is that CentrePoint will grow. It will be a true ministry team that will have, as a part of it, connected to it, the fivefold gifts of Ephesians and those kind of leaders. And then we'll start developing a network of churches, not just existing ones, but planting churches as well, and planting churches of new converts, not just opening up another building with some people that are Christians, but actually getting into neighborhoods and bringing the gospel into the people's lives and seeing churches begin right there in neighborhoods. So that's really the vision, and that requires equipping pastors, equipping emerging leaders to be able to do that work, and then seeing that multiplied. I'm not thinking of CentrePoint becoming a huge organization that covers, the globe. I mean that CentrePoint influences others to start the same thing. This is what I love about Build. Build is not trying to be my boss. They're not trying to run CentrePoint. They're trying to equip me to do my work here in my context. And they're glad to do what they can to help me. And I'm glad to do what I can to help them. But they're not trying to control this. They're not trying to make me do something their way. They're just saying, hey, why don't you wrestle with these things and come out of this with something? And so that's what I want. I don't want CentrePoint to be necessarily across upstate New York. I would like there to be center points, if you will. Different regions developing their own ministry teams who are ministering in their area amongst the churches. That's fantastic. You guys, so you got your this new denomination down there, and I want you guys to have a good networking ability and your own ministry team down there, regional ministry team in Philadelphia that's able to work among the churches to help them get established, equip their leaders, and grow. But I don't have to try to control that. I don't have to try to run that. I just want to be a resource and maybe a instigator, getting people thinking.
I like that a lot. Okay, last two questions.
All right.
One I love to ask people. I think I gave you some preview. You go back, God would allow, and you can meet a emerging young man, Mike Neigh, some years ago. What advice would you give him in his walk? Would you give him any specific exhortations? Would you recommend any specific books? How would you encourage young Mike Neigh?
Well, I would recommend Life N, or something that would have existed like that. And I think I would have said this: approach your life intentionally with the kingdom rewards in mind. And the example I gave you was when I was in high school. I was a track athlete. Had the opportunity my senior year. I was closing in on breaking the record in the high hurdles. But what it required was all my time spent in track. At the same time, I was interested in architecture and some things, and I could have gotten into a BOCES program where the students, they actually built a house and sold it. And I look at the practical experience I could have got there that would be so beneficial to me now. But I dismissed that because it was going to interfere with what I wanted to do with track. And I've looked over the last 30 years, I've regularly thought to myself, I graduated in 1988, so almost 35 years, I have never had opportunity to use my hurdle skills in any particular way that benefited anybody. I got my name on a board and I got a bunch of medals, but it's nothing. Right. I tell you what, though, if I had learned some basic carpentry skills in building a house, man, I'd be so much further along in a whole lot of things. And so guys don't think about that. I run into guys all the time, and I'm sure you do too, especially in the city, who think NBA's my ticket, man. Yeah. NFL's my ticket, Yep. I mean, I wasn't even in a big money one. Track and field is not even making that much money, But I'm going to be the next Serena Williams, right? Yep. Make $94 million. You're not. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to convince guys that sports can be good and helpful, but man, you got to be much more intentional about what you're putting your time into. And one of the things with my children is I've intentionally directed them away from sports in general towards learning some life skills in the workforce that will take you way, way beyond the ability to kick a soccer ball well. Now, we do some sports and we get them in some camps occasionally or something, but I don't let it become the focus that it was for me, because I realized that it wasn't wasn't all that helpful in the end. And I would say that's true, by the way, of all entertainment. I think the entertainment is to be a part of life, but for most people, it becomes such a draw and so central, right? I gotta be the next singer. I gotta be the next actor. I gotta be the next whatever entertainment. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the reality for most people. And so you're spending a lot of time trying to get someplace that you're probably never going to get. So Life N is helpful in that, because Life N says, hey, listen, here's how you're designed. Work within that and think out how to do that. And by the way, one of the things I encourage for young people is the idea of shadowing in the workforce. I love shadowing, and I love the idea of taking a year or two off of schooling before you jump into college. Yep. You may find you don't even need to go to college. I wasted 2 full years in college. I had no reason to be there except I wanted to get out of my house. Mm-hmm. And I'd have been better off getting out of my house and getting a job and putting my money aside like my children are. Right. I mean, I'm telling you, I got 2 daughters right now who could, in our area, they could put down a 30 to 50% down payment on a house right now out of what they got in the bank.
Wow.
It's like, man, I was in debt when I stopped school, and not just school debt.
Time to get out of debt.
And it wasn't just school debt. I was just in plain debt because I blew my money. I just spent it whenever I got it,
Yeah.
So, intentionality. I think I would say to myself, you need to be more intentional and not just kind of riding the wave, but much more intentional about what you're doing.
Because you don't have much time. And I think the temptation of the world now is, at one point it was distraction. Discouragement. Now it's distraction. It's all this stuff that either filters into your intentions and makes you go after the wrong thing. So you end up someday saying, I wasted my time, or you end up going after nothing. And 2 things I can't stand is a man that has no ambition for the Lord. Just, I'll see what happens next. And also a man that just doesn't read books, right? I think you got to grow yourself, right? You gotta think deeply, and I think the church needs men who think and consider. And one thing I think we can get from this conversation that I hope people are grasping as they're listening is whoever I am in my thought life at home is going to filter down into my church life. Mm-hmm. And so whether I'm a leader, ministry leader, or just a congregant serving in ministry, all that's going to filter in. And the family is a bigger battleground than the church has thought in many ways, in some sense. Everybody and their mom is out fighting for the ability to get married. But we're not often having that ambition. I want to have that kind of marriage that shows a picture of Christ in the church. I want to have that kind of family where my children are sent out, like arrows from my quiver. In some sense, we're in a survival scarcity mindset when it comes to church and family. And I think if there's anything that I hope people get from this conversation is it's time to kind of put the Bible back in the driver's seat. To family, my life, to church, find the resources, find the people. And like you said, that's key. Be intentional. I would even say, my pastor that licensed me, Pastor Dale Crawley, there's 2 things he always said that stuck with me. He used to tell me back then, be selfish in a godly way. In other words, pursue people that can help me. Pursue people that can disciple me, right? Pursue all the resources that are going to make me the man or the preacher or the pastor that I need to be. And not just look at, it's good. This is good for you or you for you. Like just be passive. But he also says, manhood is something that's caught and not just taught. We got to see it. We got to get around people that sharpen us. Because it's very easy to fall into the devil's traps, what he has for us. And so, and that's why I'm thankful for Ken. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for my friendship with Brian, although I'll use this opportunity to shame him because I haven't heard from him. We haven't talked. So if he does watch this, I do want him to feel bad and repent. But truly, and I want to give you, your flowers while I have you on here, just the reputation you have, because I heard about you before I ever met you, and that's something that's great about the church, that we can find people where we may not have a lot in common. We may not come from the same backgrounds, but when Christ gets a hold of you and uses you and his Spirit gets you, it leaves a mark and people talk about it. Lord willing, it has a reputation that inspires people. You know what I mean? And hearing, you got to meet Pastor Mike. And I'm like, I'm just getting to know you, Ken. I'm going to meet Pastor Mike. And so thank you for how God uses you and being intentional in your own life. And I'll let you give any closing thoughts or exhortations, hopes you have for the church. I'll turn that over to you.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't think probably anything more than what we've talked about. It's I think, again, probably the key thing in my life is intentionality. So
Yeah.
I'll just tell you, here's what happened when I was commissioned as an elder here at Durkeetown. I said to them this, because what people knew about us was a big family that homeschools and doesn't have a television. I said, I'm not here to make everybody be a big family that homeschools and doesn't have a television.
Right.
But I am here to help you be intentional about why you would or wouldn't have that. So are you going to send your kids to the public school? Fine. But you need to be intentional about why that's happening, not just traditional or squeezed into the mold of the culture. You're going to limit your family size? Okay. But you need to be intentional about it. I'm going to ask you questions that are going to force you to say, this is why we're doing this. We've actually thought about this and decided to do it. And that's what I'm after. I don't want people just taking tradition or the culture around them and replicating it because it's there. I want them to say, I'm doing this because I know this is what I should do. And especially it needs to be coming out of the scriptures. Scriptures are leading me. The Spirit is leading me to act this way very intentionally. And then I'll back you up full force. But what I won't do is I won't back up the person who goes, well, this is just the way we did it. So there you go. Intentionality. That's my middle name.
That's it. And so I'll say in closing, that's something for all of us. The whole idea of the podcast is how does the gospel drive us to motion? I think everybody is trying to do good things in our country, in our world. And I want to call people back to considering from the scriptures what is good and what is godly and how do we accomplish that. And so hopefully everybody's got something from that. Leslie, so how can people follow you online, Pastor Mike? How can they learn about CentrePoint? And then we'll close.
Okay. Well, we have a website, CentrePoint ADK. And we spell it strange, CENTRE, kind of the British way, but you don't have to spell it that way to get into it. I got both domain names. So
okay.
We also have a Facebook page, and so those are two areas that you can be following. I'm also part of a group called Gospel Advance of upstate New York, Gospel Advance NY, and you can kind of follow some of the things that we're doing there. So that's what we're doing, and encourage you to take a look at it. There's courses that we put on a regular basis in conjunction with a group out of New Hampshire, and Zoom courses. So we're always welcoming people in. You don't have to be a student of Antioch to get in on those. And there you go. I'm leading a course on art from a Christian perspective. This on Sundays, and then I'm going to lead a parenting with a plan course. It's out of the same group of books as The Life to the End, and I'm leading that one as well. So you can check those out on the website and see what they're about and register right from there.
And I'll link them all in this video. Those are all good. Those could be podcasts on their own. There's so much, and we got to get you on TikTok or something. This has all been great. I'm going to link everything in the descriptions to the video, and hope people will follow, learn, ask questions, reach out to you. Thanks so much, Pastor Mike. This has been
you're welcome,
really,
Erik.
really good. And, we'll see what the Lord will do over the next few weeks and months with Antioch and CentrePoint. So thanks a lot, everybody. Make sure you check the description of the video and follow up. Get with CentrePoint and get that Life End course. Can't recommend it enough. Until next time, everyone.
The Life Development Series will help you design a personalized life development plan shaped by your unique life situation, gifts, and abilities. Life to the Nth pulls from ancient wisdom traditions and contemporary life development research to focus on 4 main spheres that are essential to attaining life to the end. A life that is fully enjoyed and full of meaning and purpose. Through 6 strategic steps, you will construct strategies for your own development, your family's development, and your life work. Please contact Mike Neigh at centrepointadk@gmail.com.